I am Mayor Knapper. Thank you for joining us this evening for our town hall. Thank you, Gina LaRose, for telling me yes, better. Okay, excuse me, as you can see, we are trying to figure out how we can have a hybrid model of this town hall. And thank you for your patience as we try to figure out what we need to do in order to be successful. Because in the future, what we would like to do is continue to stream our meetings over Zoom, as well as allow some people back into council chambers for our meetings. So again, thank you for your patience, and we will figure this out. Regarding our budget town hall, I would like to thank you for joining us. Like Dr. King, I believe that budgets are moral documents. And so this town hall is here to make sure that we hear your voice. We want to know what's important to you, what you need, so we can ensure that we are focusing money in our budgets to address those needs and those wants. So again, thank you for being present this evening. And then finally, just to give a plug to the surveys that the city has issued to community members. Please fill those out if you haven't already and return them to City Hall. If you receive one, we can fill them out online. Just follow the link that you received with the paper survey. And if you'd like to fill out the paper survey and return that, you're welcome to do so as well. Those will be needed back at City Hall toward the end of November. So if you can get those into us ASAP, we would be grateful. All right, so with all of that being said, I would like to turn it over to Councilmember Schmidt to also provide you with the logo. Councilmember Schmidt.
Thank you. So I guess I just wanted to say that I am really excited that this day is finally here. When I started and did my first budget, I noticed that there really wasn't any meaningful opportunity for people to provide input into the budget, because the only session we had for comment was one session where we went over the whole budget, and then when we voted on it. And so over the last few years, I know city staff has been working hard, and we have been working hard to improve this process for you guys to spread out our discussion of the budget over many work sessions, to break it down so we can talk about it in pieces and make it more understandable, to have a budget that is easy for people to read and understand. And then so finally, we are at this point where we have a chance for you all to share with us what your thoughts are about this money. It's your money. We are making these decisions for you. So we want to know from you what you want us to do with it. And so I just want to thank city staff, especially Karen Dilber. She put a lot of work into that budget, and all of my colleagues for being in support of having this town hall tonight. So we look forward to hearing from you. You want me to say the next thing that's on the?
That one? Oh, no. Okay, how about now? Okay, now we might get some feedback. Okay. All right. So I'm going to turn this over to our Director of Finance, Karen Dilber, to make a presentation regarding our budget and some timeline information. This will probably be, bear with us, about 10 or 15 minutes of some important slides.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so the information that I'm going to provide is some, can you hear me okay? Just check that really quick. Okay, sorry. So the information I'm going to give you, I put together a few slides that I usually put out there for Citizens Academy. So if you've attended Citizens Academy when we had it previously, you've probably seen some of these slides before. They move pretty quick. And then I had been asked to put together some information on the types of revenue streams that we have, you know, and just I've got a few pie charts in there that show you like where they come from, and then the different types of expenses we have. And I've put together slides that show audited numbers, our most recent fiscal year audited numbers, which is fiscal year ending 1920. And then I put together slides that show projected numbers in the budget for 21-22. I don't have fiscal year end 2021 numbers yet. We're still being audited on those. So I'm going to attempt to share my screen with you, and hopefully we can get through these slides quickly. And yeah, let's see what happens. Okay, so this screen right here, can you see my screen? Okay, awesome. So this is just a basic outline of how we do budgeting. I thought you might find it helpful to know, you know, how we've done things. As Councilmember Schmidt pointed out, historically, it was one person doing the budget and then being presented when it was, you know, time for the public hearing and when it was council's time to vote on it. We've made some changes the last couple of years, and we're trying to incorporate more of the opinion of the residents, the businesses, any affected stakeholders. So this is just a brief outline of how we've been doing things. You know, changes may still come. Change is not always a bad thing. You know, so this is just your basic outline right here. The city of Maplewood practices fund accounting. These are two definitions here that basically explain that to you. I'm not going to necessarily read the definitions to you, but in a nutshell, what fund accounting does is it helps us keep track of the money because it comes from different streams, different sources. So by practicing fund accounting, we can keep track of where the money comes from and where the money's going. If you were ever to look through our financial reports, you would see the different funds. If you're super excited or can't sleep, I recommend you pull it up. It's filled with a lot of interesting financial information. We also practice what's called modified accrual accounting, which basically means that we match our, excuse me just a second, my cat is tearing up this piece of paper. I'm so sorry. So it basically means we match our revenues and our expenses to the time frame in which they're incurred. So as a finance person, I'm usually either, if I'm working on a budget, I'm looking forward, or I'm typically working in the past. So I get statements from different institutions, you know, about the tax money they're sending us. Well, that's not tax money we earn today. It's tax money we earned in the past. So we practice modified accrual. At the end of our fiscal year, we're still getting money that was earned in that fiscal year, so we have to move it back. So that's just kind of, in a nutshell, the accounting that we practice here. I am so sorry, he's driving me bananas. We also have, which is rather unique to government, non-exchange transactions. And the example I use in Citizens Academy is you pay for things, but you don't get the direct service. So you can't walk into City Hall and say, I'll take $20 worth of Burdell. Like you can't do that. So it's basically a non-exchange transaction. You pay your taxes and you get services, but they're not necessarily equal to the amounts that you're paying for the transaction. So I'm just, and really that's not necessarily pertinent to the budget. I just kind of want you to understand the types of money that we deal with so that, you know, as you're going through this, you're just kind of aware. Next is our general fund. So this is our chief operating fund. The general fund can basically be used for anything. There are some restrictions, but in a nutshell, if any fund were experiencing a shortfall, we can use the general fund to bail it out. It's just general money. It's general revenue streams, as opposed to a capital projects fund, which can be only used for capital projects like streets or purchasing equipment that has a useful life of more than a year. Or a debt service fund, which we can only use those revenue streams to pay the different types of debt that we have. And I still have South Big Bend TIF on here. That's gone. So don't ask me what that is. I can tell you, it's just gone. These are other debt service funds that we do currently have and that are active. And we do have revenue streams associated with them, but we can only use that funding to pay that specific debt. They have different maturity dates. They're not all going to be mature at the same time. Some are newer, some are older. So we'll still see some for a while. We also have special revenue funds, and those are funds that are specific to their specific source. So like special business district, we collect those on behalf of the special business district. We can only use those for a special business. Parks and stormwater fund, we can only use those for parks and stormwater type expenses. Sewer lateral, the same. Fire sales tax fund can only be used for the fire department. Solid waste, the same. So this is a little chart from our fiscal year 19-20 financial statement that shows our revenues by type. And if you look here, you can see that sales and use tax is our biggest chunk of that pie. Smaller pieces, gross receipts taxes, that's the second, and then property taxes is after that. So this just kind of gives you a basic outline of our fiscal year 19-20 revenues and where they came from. And again, I'm going to show you these in different formats. Like I said, it's going to move pretty quick. First of all, nobody wants to hear the finance people speak, so we're just going to keep rolling right along. And these slides are available at cityofmaplewood.com in the finance section in case you want to review them, or if I'm going too fast. Because again, nobody wants to hear the finance people speak, so we kind of do it quickly, because usually people start to fall asleep. So this tells you our 19-20 revenues by fund, and these are audited numbers that have been verified by an outside party. I try to use audited numbers as much as possible, because then it leaves not very much room for interpretation. Someone else who maybe knows more than I do, maybe they don't, has audited these numbers and said, yes, they're fine. As you can see, the biggest chunk of this pie is the general fund at 48.5% of the revenues that we received in fiscal year 19-20. The other ones, Deer Creek, that's one of the tips that we have. Parks and stormwater, that's a big chunk. Capital improvement, but basically what you need to know here is the general fund is the biggest piece of that pie. So this, I just wanted to share with you, someone asked us about our sales taxes. This breaks down our sales taxes by source. And what I want you to see here is that the city of Maplewood's piece of the sales tax pie is actually the smallest. So I'm not saying I'm not making a judgment statement on whether our taxes are high or low. I just want you to see where we fit in so you have the information. This is our property tax pie. It shows you, it takes an average bill and breaks it down by rate, and we put those into percentages of the total, so you can see here where we fall into that. We are actually city of Maplewood, we're at 10.63%. So the school district does have the biggest piece of the pie, but most school districts do. So this is our estimated 2021 revenues from our budget by source. This has property taxes as the biggest piece. That's true because we collect it for our TIF districts as well. So that makes the property taxes the biggest piece of that pie. But in terms of overall spending, the sales and use taxes is actually the biggest piece that we get that we can actually use. The property taxes, if they're in a TIF district, we have to, again, specifically use those for that TIF debt because that's a debt service fund. And then here, This is our 1920 expenses by fund. And if, again, what I want you to take from this is that the general fund is the biggest piece of that pie. So when you're talking about budgets and things you want to use the money for, unless it comes out of a restricted fund, like last year at the town hall meeting, someone, I guess that would be 2 years ago, someone had the great idea to do a tree survey. And so we can take that out of parks and storm because it's directly related to, you know, parks and trees and landscaping and stuff like that. So unless you have some ideas that are specific to a type of fund like that, the majority of the expenses would come out of the general fund. And that's what I want you to see here. This is our fiscal year 1920 expenses by department. Our biggest department, our two biggest departments, we had police and then fire. And then let's see, well, capital improvements, that doesn't really count. And then TIF, public works. So anyway, this just breaks it down for you by department. This is our categories in our 2021-22 budget. The budget itself, all the expenses, and it does, again, include the debt. And this is just that broken down by categories. And then this is our 2021-22 general fund budgeted expenses by category. So I took our budget and I broke it down by commodity, salary / personnel, services, and then capital outlay. And this is what that comes out to be. And if you look at this, you'll see our biggest expense is our personnel and our salaries expenses. And this I wanted you to see because it's kind of important when we're budgeting. We're trying to protect our credit rating. We are under, let's just say, advisory by the people who issue our credit rating to not use our general fund reserves for the next 3 to 5 years. We've got 1 year under our belt. So we've got about between 2 and 4 more to go. I don't know like when they're going to surprise us again and, you know, do an audit of it. But I wanted you to see this because it shows, and all I did was take the numbers out of our financial reports for revenues versus expenses, audited numbers, and just laid out a diagram for you. And as you can see, we've been operating using our general fund reserves for quite some time now. So when we budgeted for 2021-22, it was very important to us to make sure that we had a balanced budget and we weren't dipping into our reserves. So I just want you to keep that in mind, you know, as you toss around ideas. And then finally, this is from the Missouri state statutes. I want you all to know that we have to present a balanced budget. So the federal government, lots of fun, but they don't have to have a balanced budget. They can keep raising the debt ceiling and scare all of us with a government shutdown when, you know, they don't agree and whatever. But we don't have that luxury. As a municipality in Missouri, we have to present a balanced budget. And a balanced budget can be revenues less expenses plus reserves, but it can't be revenues less expensive plus reserves plus, gosh, we're hoping. So, you know, we have to use what's available to us. And that's what this is saying. Now, again, in the general fund, we're trying very hard not to use the reserves because, you know, we need to protect our credit rating. So anyway, that is my slideshow in a nutshell. And see, that just zipped right along. I don't know who's next. Who am I turning this over to?
That's okay. I'm going to jump in here.
Okay.
Hopefully there's. I'm going to use Councilmember Schmidt again. Can you hear me? Mute this, but I'm getting feedback. Okay. Use the mic. Bear with us for a sec. Okay. Still getting some feedback. Okay. Okay, we're good. I don't know why we're still getting feedback. Let me mute it.
Yeah.
Can people give me a thumbs up? How's that? Okay, it's looking. Okay, thank you, Karen, for running through those slides for us. I know it's a lot of information for folks. That wanted to provide some sort of context for you. We have two people here at City Hall, actually, two residents, and we're going to do our own breakout session. And each of you that are tuning in from your home, you'll be in a breakout session as well. But before we do that, before we put you in breakout sessions and before we have our own breakout session here at City Hall, I want to just kind of review the breakout session questions, go through them and let you digest them for just a few moments before we actually do that. So question number one, I'm going to run through these. What questions do you have about the budget and how it works? Question number two, what would help you learn more about the budget? Question number three, really getting to the meat of this, is what services provided by the city do you value? And there might be some sort of a ranking that you have in regards to that question. So give some thought to that. What services do you feel like need more investment? And what services do you feel like need less investment? So again, that gets into some kind of prioritization process. And then finally, how would you characterize your value of services for the taxes paid? How would you characterize your value of services for the taxes paid? So those are the 5 questions. We may get into other things in the breakout sessions. I think we're going to try to take approximately 15 to 20 minutes in the breakout sessions, and we'll see how that goes, but that's the goal here. And so I'm going to turn this over to Councilmember Falkingham to execute that.
1 second here. I am working on breakout rooms, and there'll be hold on 1 sec here, getting this together. We'll do that. Okay. Yeah, give me just a second to assign everybody to rooms. Looks like we have, let's see, 4, 1, 2, 3. I like it. Okay. Okay, the breakout rooms will close here in about 20 seconds, which will return everybody to the meeting. We still have some people in rooms. And I'm not sure why I can't hear Michael Reese, but I will work on that. Actually, I may know what it is. Hold on 1 second.
Okay. Councilmember Wood, can you hear me okay? I asked you to unmute.
Let me, yes, I can.
Hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Wonderful. Well, thanks, everyone. Hopefully that was a spirited discussion and exchange. Who would like to go first, a council member, to report out on what your group talked about?
I could go first if you want.
Okay, please do.
Okay, we had a great discussion. It was really good. We did talk about parks and recreation. Lainey was bringing up some things about the pool bonds and how they thought that they were getting $400,000 payment. You know, once the payment was made, that they would just start getting $400,000, but that's not what happened. It was allocated to salaries, and they've been working on their master plan. And she's letting us know that they're not bringing in enough revenue to fund all the parks that we have. We have a lot of parks, so there's a concern about how we're going to continue to operate all those parks with the money that they have to work with. Then we discussed Prop P, how we can use those funds and how much we have to use. And we discussed about, can it be used for other things besides just hard policing, like cars and things like that? Are there other areas that we could use the money for public safety? And so I did let them know that that had been an ongoing discussion. We have talked about those things before, and that will be brought up again. So did not have an answer for that, but we did have a nice discussion about that. There was some questions. Well, we did talk about how, you know, residents, they're having higher taxes on their homes. And is there any way that we can help that situation? Because taxes are just keep going up for folks. And there's a concern that people can't live. And we have talked about that as well. People can't live here in Maplewood and can't afford their homes. The taxes are going up, and to buy a home is very expensive too. So, you know, it's just a concern. And we talked about how you can, you can try to appeal it. And the process, Lainey was saying that it's not that difficult. So I think folks probably, I have heard of people doing that. I have myself not done that, but that's a good thing to do. And I will look into that myself. And another thing we were talking about was economic development goals, because we have more revenue. We have more revenue. We need more revenue because we have more going out than we have coming in. So we need new and creative ways to bring more revenue into the city. So, and we did talk about making maybe some kind of rules about how people can come in and flip houses and then sell them for a lot of money, because it was brought up that some cities have, it's harder for them to be able to flippers, you know, to come in and do that in your city. So I think I covered most of it. If anybody that was in there with me I could have missed something that you want to bring up, please do so.
Very good, council member. Thank you. What I'd like to do is kind of go through all the reports from council members, and then we'll kind of open it up after that, if that's a good sequence. So thank you, council member Wood. Councilmember Crossley, I saw your hand up. Are you? Okay. Let me unmute you here.
All
Okay.
right, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
So I'm seeing some thumbs, awesome. Okay, so we started talking about fines and fees. And one of the group members was asking, you know, what's our fine and fee structure? Who gets to set that? How can we change that? And noted that, you know, our budget says that our goal is not to use fines and fees as revenue. And I think that's largely based in some state law as well. But we talked a little bit about where do those funds end up, and how can we prevent having sort of, life-changing, life-altering fines and fees. We definitely don't want anyone to have a really negative repercussion from that. And then we talked a little bit about what exactly is the city funding, right? We saw, all the pie charts and the division of the dollars in the broad categories, but we talked a lot about what I would call kind of more people-based service needs rather than like your traditional expenditure on fixing a sidewalk or installing a new stop sign. And so we talked a lot about just the needs that parents have, the needs that children have. Also, what sort of programming are we funding for the elderly in our community? One of the group members brought up there are a couple of community gardens in Maplewood, but what type of services or outreach are we doing for people that need it? And so from there, we started talking really briefly about police and social services. So we do have that social worker through BJC. This isn't a silver bullet solution to what people need. And so, what can we do to make that program more functional, more successful for more people? And then our final kind of question was about grant funding. So what is the city doing to secure additional grant funding for different types of needs that we're seeing?
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you, Councilmember Crossley. I'm just gonna call Councilmember Phillips. Were you part of a group? Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. So in my group, we kind of covered all the bases, and I'll start with where we finished, which was kind of talking about how would you characterize your value of the services. And everyone in my group really felt like we do get good value for the services, for the taxes that we pay in Maplewood. Would we all like to have lower taxes? Yes, but we feel like the quality of services that are being provided by the city are giving us a good value for that, and particularly good customer service from the city. So I'll start with where we finished and then kind of break down some of the things that we think could use improvement about the budget process is having more itemized information available or easily available. I wasn't sure based on how much we receive in our council packets, how much of that is searchable online. So as we go through the budget process throughout this year, or the upcoming year, hopefully we can have more easily available information for people as we go through that process and potentially see if it's available to search particular keywords in our budget so that people can learn more about all of those line items and really dig in if they want to, rather than just seeing sort of the big chunks of the budget process. Overall, I think my group really felt like our infrastructure and our streets are important, and they contribute to public safety as well. So having the safe streets and safe sidewalks is important to the community. And a suggestion was street lights, and we have some dark places on the streets that potentially we could investigate adding additional street lighting. And I know that's through Ameren, but I know the city has some influence there. So that was one thing. We've also talked about more resources for the unhoused and aging in place. And we touched briefly on some of the parks, particularly the parks in Ward 1 that don't get as much attention as some of the other more flagship parks, if you will. So learning more about how the parks budget is, how those resources are divided. Let me see. Also, some outreach and education about the resources that are available. So I know with the new Public Services Commission that I'm sure they will be taking on that task of helping our community learn about the resources that are already out there. So, so some education on that. And then we did talk about, the hard question about what should we spend less on, and without really a lot of people knowing what those line items are, or knowing what, what you can shift money away from. One of the suggestions that I think a lot of us agree with is our police shouldn't be spending so much time at Walmart, that Walmart can pay for their own security. And we also talked about the size of vehicles, be it police vehicles or public works vehicles, with the cost of gas going up. And if we can trim the budget in the future with having fewer enormous vehicles and SUVs. And I think, yeah, overall, I think that was everything that we covered with my group.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Phillips. Member Schmidt, were you part of a separate group? Okay. Okay.
Right. So we covered a lot of things that other people have spoken about, but I will go through them. So starting with the first thing, one thing that was noted is that in the budget, there are places where there will be sort of like a large increase or decrease in revenue or expense. And in some places it's explained and in some places it's not. And so, maybe understanding if there's a particular reason for that, or if in those instances going forward, we could provide a footnote or something that explains, why that occurred. And then in terms about learning, what would help learn more about the budget, we also spoke about having more detail. One question was about sort of like the police budget. That was such a large part of our budget, understanding the detail about where that money is going. I agree with Councilmember Phillips. I think perhaps some of that detail may be available on our website, though very difficult to find, because, I think it's probably, I suggested it's attached to agendas from our work sessions when we went over it, but that is the one difference with the new budget report, that detail isn't in there. So if there's a way to have the detail available on the website, like Councilmember Phillips said, that's searchable so people can dig in further if they want. And then also in terms of wanting to sort of understand too, we have a police school resource officer, sort of understanding, is that a valuable use of our resources? What does that person do? Are they doing what they're supposed to do? And is that something we want to spend our money on? Let's see, what services you value? The traditional trash, recycling, sewer, lateral, but one that was popular is our events, the events that the city holds and brings people to our city, and just people really enjoy those. Another is our library. We understand they have their own budget, but that is such an important asset in our community that it's helpful for us to use some of our funds sometimes to help out when they need it. And then in terms of needing more investment, one thing we talked about is we could be a real leader in the area in terms of community policing, in terms of, providing alternative ways, things other than the police to deal with certain situations. Hiring a social worker. Yes, we do have Ms. Bevan, but her role is very limited in what she can do, and it does not encompass all the things. And it's also very reactive. Whereas if we had a social worker, that's someone that could work and, you know, help people out, provide services, you know, maybe before an incident occurs. Also, you know, supporting low-income members of our community and getting them resources. More funds allocated to the parks. We also had that come up about, you know, that there aren't enough funds to keep the parks up. And then another thing we talked about in terms of budgeting, in terms of the fact that we, you know, are getting to a point where we do need, we don't have necessarily enough revenue for our expenses, is to apply zero-based budgeting. I know that's something Councilmember Phillips is a big fan of. I am too, but the suggestion was like a hybrid approach. So maybe not doing it to the whole budget, but applying it to certain parts of our budget, making people start at zero and prove, you know, why they need money instead of just starting with a pot of money. So other than that, I think that's about it.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Schmidt. Councilmember Page, I'm gonna unmute you here. You have any?
Okay.
Word out?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Great. Sounds like we had a very similar conversation to many of the other conversations, and I'll start by sort of echoing what Councilmember Phillips and Schmidt's groups talked about in terms of, you know, when looking at the police budget, being able to find more information easily, maybe having some sort of session like similar to this, specific to that budget, so people can get more detailed and have a better understanding. That led us into a conversation about investment in that budget specifically. And again, as I've heard in a couple of these other groups talked about, you know, really are there ways to employ social services or alternative solutions? So, you know, rather than thinking less investment in police, maybe a reconsideration of how those funds are used, and so that we can support our citizens. With that said, all were in agreement that the fire and police were important and good values. We also talked about Park and Rec and how that was important and a good value, but more investment could be needed. And then the other big topic we had for more investment was we felt that perhaps the streets were at a low ebb, and that was something that needed some attention, but otherwise felt that there was good value in public works in the city. And that's brief, but I think that's it.
Okay, thank you.
He's my council member.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to report out for our group, which included Mayor Knapper and two residents here at City Hall. There's some themes here that are consistent, but overall, there was a comment that, you know, the individual thought that they get a fair value, you know, based on the value of services for what they're being taxed. So specific comments, there's an advocacy for joining the St. Louis Green Business Challenge from a Sustainability Commission member. That's a $350 cost to do that. And that would position us to learn some best practices from in the community, and also to perhaps get a grant for a greenhouse gas inventory, a new one. Support for the Central Business District. I think that we do a good job supporting the business district, but anything we can do to continue to support it is encouraged. People think our police and fire are doing a great job, but also Public Works, and Public Works in particular is maybe on a shoestring budget. So can we invest more resources there?
Yes.
In Public Works? It was brought up about supporting service learning projects in partnership with our schools. Another item that was brought up was in our newsletter. This is a little bit of a tangent, but in our newsletter, can we emphasize the things that are going well in certain streets and certain blocks? So those are lessons learned, and those areas where blocks are safe and things are thriving. Can we emphasize that in our newsletter? How about being more bicycle and pedestrian friendly? How do we use the budget to support that?
there was a particular street, Zephyr Place, being resurfaced, needs resurfacing. Supporting more streets and alleys being lit. There are certain parts of Maplewood that are dark. Can we get those areas lit so that they're safer? And then having the east side of Manchester sharing the success of the special business district. What can we do to market the eastern part of Manchester, the eastern part of special business district, so that the entire area is successful? And are there opportunities for more anchor stores on the eastern part of Manchester in the special business district? People are very enthused about the access to City Hall. That was a comment that was made. So those were the items that folks in our group are articulated and shared with us. And that concludes our reports from the breakout sessions. I think now, we're roughly an hour and a half into this meeting, but I think now what we could do is open it up if someone wants to raise their hand. And if you want to make a comment or maybe reinforce something that you already heard, and we'll look to let you into the meeting here.
Michael, I just want to say real quick, thank you for everybody's patience for getting the sound worked out here at City Hall. It's been a bit of a trick, and it works a lot differently when there's only 1 or 2 people in there as opposed to 4 and a full meeting on. But I think I know exactly what we need to make that work effectively. So thank you.
Thank you for your support, Councilmember Frockingham. And yes, I echo everyone's patience. Thank you. And as we look to come back live with our council meetings hopefully soon, and also allow people to pipe in through Zoom, we got some kinks to work out, and we'll figure that out here in the coming days and weeks. Okay. Okay. We've got a resident here. Heidi Helmuth, did I pronounce that right, Miss Helmuth?
Helmuth, yes. I have a question on the budget, obviously. On page 37 of the budget, there are 2 numbers that changed significantly from past years. So one of them is, just find it on my, one of them is the last table on 37. It's account number 30945 for other revenue. That was 130,000 2 years ago, 150,000 last year, and next year's projected 850,000. Is there any explanation?
Well, I'm going to see if Ms. Stilber, our finance director, has any response to that first before I respond.
So the difference is the ARPA funding. We had to put it somewhere, so we put it in miscellaneous revenue. The money that we did receive has to be broken down and put into the different funds, but for budgeting purposes, because we weren't exactly sure what we were getting, we put in $700,000 into the general fund because we had to put it somewhere. So, and that's miscellaneous revenue.
Thank you. And then the second one I had was on the court fines and forfeitures. From 2019, 2020, it was 270,000. And then for this year and next year, it jumped over 100,000. I'm just curious as to why such a big increase in that. The reality of this year and the budget for next year.
Yes. So the reason it went up is we're trying to be, we did an average of not including last year, because last year with it being COVID and everything being shut down, it was a mess. But the way we come up with the different revenue figures, unless we know of something specific coming in, like ARPA funding, is we just take an average of the previous 5 years to project out for the future. So that's where that number came from. It's based upon actual averages, not budgeted projected averages.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Helmuth. Okay. We have another individual, Mr. Korea.
Hi, thanks,
Hello.
Michael. You got my name right. Thank you. I appreciate that very much. I had another sort of increase question similar to Heidi's. So on page 6, this is about the operating budget, and the Prop P rose by almost $200,000 between the 2019-20 fiscal year and the 2020-21. And I mean, there's probably obvious reasons for that, but I'm just curious what those are, like what that money went to. I know that there was recent votes about vehicle acquisitions and some computer stuff, but is that the explanation as to where those funds went? And then the follow-up question to that is, do we have any more funds left for Prop P, and what are they sort of earmarked for?
Oops. All right, Karen. Sorry, Karen.
You muted yourself, Karen.
What page are you looking at? I can't, I'm sorry. You're muted again.
You should be off mute.
Okay.
There you go. Can you
Yeah,
tell me
don't-
what page you're looking at?
Don't mute yourself because we'll have to unmute you if you mute yourself again. So you can stay live.
Thank you, Sean. It's page 6.
Okay, page 6.
And so just in the last fiscal year, it just rose almost $200,000. So I just wonder, I mean, I know those funds were not originally available or just not just yet, and then they began to become fluid and liquid. And I'm just wondering where they all went or why the rise occurred and what's left of Prop P.
Are you looking at our budget?
Yes.
Our new budget?
No, I'm looking at the budget from last year, the 2020-21.
Okay.
I'm looking at that. So what happened from 2019-20 to 2021? So there was a big.
Okay, let me pull that up just a second, please. I'm not seeing what you're seeing, the increase. Hold on just a second.
Karen, would it be because that's when Prop P was implemented?
Well, Prop P was implemented, it was actually voted in 2017. So in fiscal year 17-18, we would not have received all that revenue.
Right.
All the, so yeah, 17-18, are you asking why there's only 286,000 that one year? That's actual. That was the first year that it was implemented. The next year would have been a full year. So that's why it increased so much. And yes, they do have a fund balance. I'm not sure what it is off the top of my head at the moment. But as far as what it's spent on, is there backup detail? Let me look at this old budget. I'm used to the new budget, so.
Well, you know, my curiosity is like what's been spent versus what's going to be spent. So I'm just kind of curious as to, you know, how we got to where we are in terms of what's left.
So I can't tell you exactly. I mean, there's been different amounts spent. It depends on the year. So, you know, what they budget for and what they actually spend, like from inception, I can't tell you what's been spent since inception. I can tell you, but I'd have to be at my desk at work and it'd probably take half a day's worth of research, and I'd be happy to get you that information. But like, I can't do that in the scope of this little meeting here. But there is still funding available. It's, you know, it's an ongoing thing. So we get the money every month, and depending upon how, you know, people purchase, like for instance, during the pandemic, that fund wasn't doing very well because that's a sales tax and people weren't shopping. So yes, there is still money available, but like right now. So in this fiscal year, this is our slow time. So from July through late November, early December, we're operating on reserves. we don't really get much in the way of income right now. So as far as what we're receiving in Prop P, it's a very small amount. Yes, there's still money in there, but we're using it for operations. So our revenue cycle is cyclical. We get our big money, property taxes and sales taxes, usually around, late November, December, January. And then if people protest, like Councilmember Wood was talking about, they'll hold those monies, and then we'll see another influx of property taxes, usually around May or June. But in the off times, we're using that money to function. So to answer your question, yes, there is still money there, but we're using it to function. So, because again, our money is cyclical. So it's not like, you or I work and we get a paycheck and, we know what's coming and, we can bank whatever and invest whatever. With us, our money is cyclical. So we only get it at certain times of the year. So then the other times of the year, we have to watch it a little more closely so that we don't, overspend and then end up with nothing. So yes, to answer your question, there is money right now. If you want a detail of the expenditures from the inception, I can get it for you. Just go ahead and email Michael and we'll get those numbers together for you.
Okay. Thank you, Karen.
Other questions, please put your hand up. Or comments. Okay. It looks like we're going to come to conclusion. Now I'm going to just make a final comment, a couple comments here so that everybody knows next steps. On tomorrow, on our homepage of the website, we will have the an after action survey that you can fill out. There'll be a link available for additional questions or comments. And then we'll certainly post this meeting recording on the city's YouTube. And again, I think the mayor and deputy mayor both spoke to this earlier. This is really going to be a process where the mayor and council take all this feedback, and I'll take all this feedback, and we'll look to incorporate it into our next year's budget. And there'll be obviously lots of budget meetings throughout the year, starting in late January, February, up through June when we adopt the next budget cycle. So really appreciate everyone's participation. And thank you, Ms. LaRose, as well. And we'll also look to summarize this meeting. There's a question asked in our group by one of our members about creating some sort of summary. So we will look to create a summary and distribute that to members of council and post it as well. So you should look for that in the coming days. Okay, thank you all very much. Have a good evening.
Good night.